A while back I made a video about the bugs and oddities in Amiyagari no Hanabi, so I figured I should do one now about Hanabi the Witch. Considering how both these games run on the same engine and are very similar overall, you would expect them to share all the same bugs, but surprisingly that's not the case. While most of the things from the first game were fixed, the second game introduces a whole new list of bugs to go over. Like the first game, none of these are major glitches, like clipping out of bounds or skipping entire bosses or areas. There are, however, some amusing ways to mess with the game, mostly involving Hanabi's animations. I'll start off with a few minor observations, before moving on to the best bugs. In World 1, in the central room, this pool of water is close enough to solid ground that you can hold crouch on it and get stuck in this kind of weird animation loop. It can be done on both the left and right sides, and I'm not sure there's any other places in the game that are low enough to the water where you can do this. Normally when Hanabi jumps into the water, you hear this sound effect. But if you press and hold jump at just the right time when Hanabi's feet touch the water's surface, she'll perform a miracle and jump off without making any kind of splash. I'm not sure exactly what the frame window on this is, but it's pretty tight, and will probably take a while to pull off consistently. The best way to tell if you're doing it right is to turn off the background music. In World 3, there's this mouse NPC named Marble, who's very helpfully standing close to the edge of this block. By talking to him near the far right corner and moving right at the same time, it's possible for Hanabi to fall off while his dialogue box appears. Again, this doesn't do anything, but it looks kinda funny. After beating the World 6 boss, if you happen to be over one of the pools of acid when the boss explosion ends, Hanabi will land and stand safely on the acid surface. She can't take damage because it's part of a cutscene. This ends once you transition to the next room. In World 8, there's this elevator you have to ride down to the bottom floor. If, while riding this elevator, you jump and firework hover, the elevator will continue without Hanabi. And when it reaches the bottom, the camera will freak out and kinda have a mini earthquake. This will go back to normal once Hanabi lands. There's a similar oddity to the water animation loop, with the bouncy surfaces in World 8. Just standing between a bouncy surface and a solid one, the animation is not quite right, and it can be made even better if you start crouching. Last thing to talk about, before we get to the main section, is these bat enemies. Damaging a bat will make it angry and it'll begin to chase you. In some areas, such as the end of World 3, the developer was prepared for this, and put an invisible wall up before the goal to prevent the bats from going any further. But I think he overlooked Worlds 4 and 7. In World 7, you can lead a bat over to these NPCs. Talking to an NPC makes Hanabi intangible, and while doing this the bat just keeps trying its best to kill you. You gotta give him credit for persistence. As soon as the dialogue box ends, Hanabi becomes damageable again. It's also possible to lead a bat all the way to the end goal in World 4. And this is my favorite because the layering is all sorts of wrong here. The bat is behind the goal, but its health bar is in front of it, and it's just not right. Now with those out of the way, we get to the main part of the video, and that is the many different ways to break Hanabi's animations. I thought the first game's animations were kinda buggy, but it turns out there's a lot more ways to mess with them in this game. First is one of the only bugs that survived from Amiyagari no Hanabi, and that's storing your jumps on cutscenes. To do this is pretty easy. What you want to do is jump into a cutscene trigger and touch it before you reach the peak of your jump. Continue to hold jump throughout the cutscene, and Hanabi will be stuck in her falling animation. By far the best application of this is the cutscene near the end of World 2, where Hanabi will just float into the scene like it's no problem. You can even do this bug during the final boss explosion, since it locks you into a cutscene. Although this trick works on every cutscene in the game that you can jump into, oddly enough, this specific cutscene in World 1 cancels out the effect, giving you an animation more similar to the one you would get when doing this glitch in the first game. I figure it must be a specific animation Hanabi goes through to cause this, but there's no other cutscenes in the game that do this. Something I only learned recently is that you can also store jumps by touching the end goal. Just jump into it and then keep holding jump. It's that easy. I don't know how I missed that for all this time. Another animation bug that I only discovered recently is that you can also store crouches going into cutscenes. This one is a lot harder to do consistently, since you can't move while crouching, and I found the best strategy is honestly just to spam crouch as you move forward and hope that it works. When it does, Hanaby will remain crouched throughout the cutscene, and that World 2 cutscene I mentioned previously is just as amazing as before. Again, you'll notice that this World 1 cutscene cancels out the animation. Moving on, it's possible to get a very strange crouching jump animation while riding moving platforms. To do this, you want to hold down the crouch button and tap jump as lightly as possible. This is very precise, on keyboard at least, but when it works you get this strange crouch jump that's cancelled into the falling animation at its peak. One of the only bugs involving fireworks that I've been able to find requires setting up a skyrocket and a handheld next to each other in the firework menu. After doing this, ready the skyrocket to be fired, but don't let go of the fire key yet. Hold down the crouch button, and when you're prepared, let go of the fire key. After this, while still holding the crouch button, quickly switch over to your handheld, and doing this sequence of events causes this strange animation bug to occur. As far as I know, this only works when switching from a skyrocket to a handheld, but it's pretty easy to do consistently once you figure it out. Hey, guess what? It's time for yet another bug involving crouching. By sliding backwards on the ice in World 7 and crouching and uncrouching, for some reason, Hanaby's eyes will remain closed until she comes to a complete stop. This can be drawn out for a pretty long time if you get a nice long slide, and is one of my favorite things just to mess around with whenever I get to this point in the game. I've saved the most mysterious animation bug for last. It's something I discovered by accident when doing the stored jump at the end goal. Somehow I caused Hanaby's victory animation to reset, and I'm not entirely sure how I did this. I was only able to replicate this bug one other time, although it's a bit harder to notice here, and the only steps I can give are to try mashing the jump and crouch buttons as much as possible. Most of the time it doesn't do anything, but sometimes you can cause this strange bug. Anyway, that's all for the bugs and oddities in Hanaby the Witch. There's probably some more I haven't found yet, so I'll keep looking whenever I play. And I'll be very curious to see what new bugs arise when Hanaby 3 is released, hopefully next year.